talk about the other round of ceasefire talks, because this is between Israel and Lebanon, and here the U.S. is playing the role of a mediator. Now, according to reports that Marco Rubio, the U.S. Secretary of State, is expected to host the Israeli and the Lebanese ambassadors for talks amid ceasefire efforts, and this will happen in Washington, D.C. Secretary of State Marco Rubio will be hosting a meeting between Israeli and Lebanese ambassadors, and this is in an attempt to launch direct negotiations between the two countries. This is also coming at a time that despite the ceasefire that has now been announced, according to US and Israel, Lebanon is not part of it. However, Iran now seems to be insisting that Lebanon be made part of these negotiations as far as ceasefire is concerned, because Iran does not want Israel to continue with its attack on its proxies, that is Hezbollah's command centers in southern Lebanon. Let's connect with Rishabh on this. So Rishabh, as far as the talks despite Hezbollah not wanting these talks to happen, but these talks are very much slated to happen in Washington when it comes to the respective countries and their ambassadors that will be hosted by the United States in this connection.
Well, Amita, as we have been discussing Lebanon and the history of Lebanon, what exactly was Lebanon? Lebanon was a French mandate that got its independence. For the longest time, Lebanon was a west-leaning country, and sometime around late 1970s, early 80s, the rise of Hezbollah happened. Iran backed it, and at one point it looked like a civil war in Lebanon. There was an arrangement that was made between the Beirut government and Hezbollah, and Hezbollah came into the mainstream politics, and then since then they have had sizable influence on the Lebanese polity and the policy as well. But then happened the October 7, 2023 massacre, where the Hamas fighters went in Israel and killed about 1,200 Israelis. In response, the Iron Sword began the operations against Gaza and Hamas, and the way Hamas was decimated and Hezbollah's top leadership, including Nasrallah, the founder, was killed. Lebanon started to realize that this is the time we can get out of the clutches of Hezbollah. And now that Lebanon believed that Iran is in no position to actually support its proxy, the excess of resistance, as Tehran calls it, be it Hezbollah in Lebanon or Houthis in Yemen. Hezbollah believe that with the intervention of United States, Lebanon and Israel can have good relations. Remember,
yes,
among all the countries in the region, be it Jordan, be it Egypt, be it Syria, Lebanon is a different country. Lebanon is not was not part of the Arab.
And now that Lebanon has openly denounced when it comes to Hezbollah, and Hezbollah not wanting these talks to happen with the U.S. However, it seems that Marco Rubio, the U.S. Secretary of State, will be hosting the ambassadors of Lebanon and also of Israel to hold these ceasefire talks. Let's in the meantime talk about when it comes to the failed peace talks that happened in Islamabad last Saturday itself, because when it comes to these direct negotiations that happened between Israel and Lebanon, which are scheduled to begin today in the United States. However, what has now been said, if there is any other possibility when it comes to another round of talks between US and Iran. However, remember, Israel was not a party to those talks in Pakistan, but it is important to understand the fact that direct talks between Lebanon and Israel are highly unusual. With the two countries, historically, the communication that has been happening was through intermediaries. Now, even as the entire world that hopes for a positive outcome, let's quickly understand exactly what both Lebanon and Israel want. Because as far as this truce talks are now concerned, the ceasefire is concerned, while US and Israel have maintained that Lebanon was not part of those cease talks. So the United States point of view is that is led by the ambassador to Lebanon, Michel Issa, and he now seems to be leading the talks there in Washington. Israel is going to be also represented by its ambassador to the US, and as far as when it comes to these two people are now concerned, the host, the mediator, is now going to be played on part of the United States of America, and that is the Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Lebanon also, when it comes to the representation is concerned, these seems to be the key participants that now we are now looking at as far as both sides would be represented in Washington in United States of America, and remains to be seen if both countries, that is Israel and also Lebanon, come to a point as far as Hezbollah command centers are concerned, because this has been continuous strikes that Israel has been carrying out against them in southern parts of Lebanon. Big strikes that have now happened. Unfortunately, more than 300 people have been killed. Now, even as the uncertainties around the war, which has entered its, if we say today seems to mark day 47, however, when it comes to the uncertainty, that seems to be increasing. Several world leaders are urgently demanding diplomatic solutions to the escalating conflicts and call for peace that emphasize immediate negotiations to actually prevent a severe energy crisis and to ensure that there is also regional stability is something that the world leaders are now demanding. Let's go back to Rishabh on this. Well, Rishabh, even on the US naval blockade, because he seems to be reaching out to other countries. However, this seems to be yet another rejection, yet another snub. And these countries, you know, when it comes to be globally, yes, they would be affected, but they do not directly want to be a part of this war, and they are immediately calling for peace talks. Rishabh? Rishabh, are you connected? Yes.
Well, you know, if we talk about how things, Amita, what we were saying, if we talk about how things are happening in West Asia, the way, you know, be it Hezbollah, be it Israel or United States, the way things are moving ahead, Israel wants to ensure that they go after every, you know, opposition they have in the region. They have they left Iran specifically to US to deal with, and Israel went after the proxies. Hamas has been decimated, and Hezbollah was being attacked. Lebanon, meanwhile, decided that they will open channels with Tel Aviv, and a clear you know, discussion between the two sides will take place, and US would be the mediator. So this will happen in Washington, where you'll have the Israeli ambassador, the Lebanese ambassador, their representatives to United Nations as well, who are stationed in New York. All these you know, personalities will sit together and have a discussion. Remember,
yes,
Blue Line, the mandate for Blue Line had ended last year, and one final extension has been given, which means that by end of this year, you will not have UN forces, you know, demarking the borders of Lebanon and Israel.
But really, when it comes to the situation that has now been looked upon, you know, can actually the US deliver what Pakistan could not, and that is for a lasting ceasefire, because this is something between US and Iran and Israel. But the talks that are expected to happen in Washington is when it comes to the representatives that will be joining in from the Lebanese and from the Israeli side. Will there be another when it comes to an escalation in conflict, or will there be a ceasefire announcement? Remains to be seen, as US is now playing the role of a mediator. Back after a very short break, you're watching Times Now.